In today's episode, we're going to focus on Are You OK Day, and we just wanted to let you know that these conversations can touch on themes around mental health, emotional well-being and suicide. Some listeners may find these topics distressing. Please take care of yourself while listening. It's completely okay to pause or step away at any time. If you're struggling or these themes bring up difficult feelings for you, we encourage you to reach out for support. In Australia, you can contact Lifeline on 131114 or Beyond Blue on 1300 22 4636. If you're outside of Australia, please check local resources in your area for immediate help. And remember, it's always okay to ask for help, and it's always okay to check in with someone you care about. Hello and welcome to the Integration Station. My name is Eleanor. I'm a child and adolescent occupational therapist, and with me today is my co-host Michael.
I'm also a child and adolescent occupational therapist.
How are you, Michael?
I'm okay.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm doing okay, but it's probably a good question to ask.
I think so, and leads in well to our topic.
Which is Are You OK Day? Yeah. And we just came off conversation, a little bit of a debrief with staff this morning, a bit of a PD in the morning about Are You OK Day. And for those, I guess, that might not know, Are You OK Day is recognised today across Australia. And it's just about really checking in with staff, with people who you come across each day. And we thought that it'd be worthwhile having today's podcast be the topic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I guess for those of you who have listened before or listening for the first time, you know, our focus is on trying to find ways forward to support the young people in our lives. Mm-hmm. And so this day is certainly focused a little bit more broadly than that, but can help those families, those young people that we're supporting, but also the team around us and just the humans in our everyday life.
Yeah. And always a good way to start. And I know we spend a lot of time each day when we come in checking with our staff. How you going?
Yeah.
And I guess Are You OK Day is a how do we have those conversations, because, you know, it's a big emphasis is that, you know, that conversation can change a life or save a life.
Absolutely.
So
we thought we'd use today to kind of chat through a little bit about the background for Are You OK Day, but importantly then how to have those really vital conversations. We thought we'd share a little bit around our own experiences in having some of these discussions, and then maybe give everyone some practical tips to walk away with so that can hopefully support you to do the same.
Yeah, absolutely. For those who do listen to the podcast, normally we do have a Q&A format, but if you have any questions or comments after today's podcast, then please feel free to send them through to podcast@otfcgroup.au. That's our email. Otherwise, on Instagram, is OTFC Group, and same with TikTok. You can send questions through to us and we'll answer those in the following episode.
Yeah.
So why don't we get started with the background of Are You OK Day, how it came about, and I guess why it's something that is recognised.
So the first Are You OK Day was in 2009, and I think what's really special about it was that this day and this recognition across the country was born from lived experience. So in 1995, much-loved Barry Larkin tragically died by suicide, which had such a profound impact, understandably, for his family and for his loved ones. Unanswered questions that can come from an experience of that nature. And his son, Gavin Larkin, in 2009 wanted to honour his father by championing a really powerful but simple question, which is where Are You OK Day came from, and recognising the impact that can have in someone's life to simply pause and create the space to ask, are you okay? And I guess the idea is that it's recognised on one particular day, but Are You OK Day really is every day, and there's not just one day in a year that warrants that conversation, but it really sheds the light for everyone to maybe start some conversations around that and help build the confidence to then carry that into other days across the year. So Are You OK became a national campaign to encourage those everyday conversations, and really at its heart it's about the power of connection and the reminder that a simple conversation, a simple check-in can actually change someone's life.
And I think that was something that we certainly discussed when we were talking to some of our staff this morning about the importance of that, just initiating that conversation.
Yeah.
And obviously that's where it starts. It's asking that question, or it's being able to check in some way. And, you know, obviously the question, are you okay, can be asked in a number of ways. It's how you going? And what's been happening.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we start building into the 4 steps.
Yeah, absolutely.
That I guess the Are You OK campaign talks about is how do we initiate or start that conversation? And that's that first step. That A is that asking. How do we ask someone, and how do we do it in a way, obviously, that comes across as genuine, but in a way that certainly allows you to both of you and the other person to feel comfortable. And I say you and the other person because often these conversations are best had when it's in an environment where it's, maybe quieter space, a private space, where someone feels more comfortable to share things that are happening or things that have happened. And as OTs, you talk a lot about setting up the right environment for whether it's therapy or whether it is a conversation. I think this can happen in every day. Yeah. Whether it's with a colleague, whether it's with a family member, or say with a client, is having the right environment and the right question to ask. I know, for example, when I'm running some of my groups, we do this every day. Every week. Instead of asking, are you okay? We do sort of a good week, bad week, and that's a quick check-in at the start of the session just to see how people are going, and often that produces a lot of conversation. Usually someone says, yeah, this week this was good and this wasn't. Yeah, and that's where we sometimes will dive in a bit more, but just asking that question in a way that's comfortable either with, say, in that group setting or with an individual can certainly pave the way for some of the next steps. Yeah, absolutely. And I think exactly what you said really leans itself in well to what those 4 steps look like. So just recapping them before we launch into that, the first step is actually asking that question to check in and say, are you okay? Yep. In a way that makes sense for you and for that person too. The second step sounds so simple but is so impactful, which is to listen and what that really needs to look like. The third step as part of the campaign is encouraging action, and then the 4th step is checking back in. So we just thought we'd take a little bit of time today to explore a little bit further about what each of those steps can look like, just to help provide some practical tips about how to implement that everyone else's day too. This kind of ties into, we sometimes talk about pet peeves or things that can be tricky for us, and I often find and look, I'm guilty of it all the time, is when, you ask someone, how you going? And it's like, yeah, all good. Yeah. And then that's become very much almost an Australian sort of response, a default, just, yep, all good. Yep, I'm all right. And often that can be a person's way of saying, I don't really want to talk too much now. I just leave it there. Or yeah, I'm fine. But sometimes I think this is where this campaign really does put the emphasis back on trying to dig a bit deeper. And I know this morning we talked about maybe some of the barriers that people might experience for being curious. And it could be like, I don't want to pry in someone's private life, or I don't feel comfortable with what's going to happen in the conversation. Definitely. But the importance of just asking that question. Yeah. And as as we're saying before about how to make that comfortable for yourself as much as anything as the other person, and being okay with, I guess, looking past maybe just that generic I'm fine or yep, I'm okay response. Yeah. Based on a person's nonverbals. Yeah. So what do you do when you maybe recognize some things that might warrant checking in? And so you're chatting there about recognizing nonverbal cues, how someone might be showing up to then think that this conversation might be worthwhile. What are some of the things that you're looking out for that might suggest checking in would be a really good step for that person? Yeah, depends on the person, and I think the more you know someone, the more you can pick up on some of those signs as well. That's very true. I know that we in the conversation we had with some of the staff this morning, it was examples like someone not attending shared spaces as much, not coming to lunch with the rest of the staff, or maybe just presenting differently than what they normally would. Yeah. Sometimes, I think we often hear people calling out for maybe support without being able to directly say I need support. And it could be comments they're making about their stress levels or fatigue or just, sharing that there's a lot going on for them, but they don't know how to maybe share that with someone else. And sometimes people feel like they don't want to burden someone else with that information. That's very true. And so being able to pick up on some of those cues. I think our CEO mentioned just even someone not wearing a scrunchie in their hair or something like that. Those really subtle cues. And I think as in our profession as OTs, we spend a lot of time observing others, and a lot of those nonverbals can give us a lot of information about how someone's traveling. But even in the way that someone says, "Yeah, I'm fine," just the inflection of that, the way it's said, can certainly give you a bit more of a clue into maybe it's not all okay. And I know you were mentioning something that you do often, which I think is great, and it sort of gives you an opportunity to be curious and to support that person more. Do you want to tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, I guess some of these questions that we're referring to can often become part of small talk, can't they? How are you? Yeah, I'm good. And then everyone kind of moves on with their day. But I suppose if I am taking the chance to really check in and go, have you been? And I'll just pause for a little while just to create the space so that even if their initial response is, yeah, I'm good, I'll just kind of hold that for a little moment longer. And I do often find that people will kind of catch that moment and can then make a choice sometimes to lean in and go, oh, actually, this has been going on. Or actually, I just had a really hard conversation. And I find that asking the question and then holding that quiet to then see if there's something that they want to fill that with, I suppose. So it doesn't become just a throwaway comment as we're passing through. And we all do that.
Of course.
But if I really want to check in to make sure I have the time to do that in a way that supports the flow on of those conversations.
I think the other thing there is that nonverbal of just lingering, just being there. Sometimes just the presence of someone else there for an extended period can lead to someone, after you've asked that question, can lead to someone sharing a bit more. Going, okay, this person is now is here, is present, and they're ready to listen.
Yes.
And that which comes to the next step, that listening part, is how do we present in a way that encourages the other person to feel comfortable to share.
Yeah, definitely.
And listening can be tricky. I know we do a lot in our job, and sometimes that, for a lot of people, listening can be a challenge in relationships, or just being able to manage different situations, that listening component.
Yeah, definitely.
So a lot comes down to how you non-verbally present yourself in that situation.
Yeah, definitely. And even, before actually getting to that listening stage as well, I know, like you'd mentioned, that you might respond going, yeah, I'm fine, I'm all good. Like, how do you encourage, if you can see with those non-verbal cues, with those things we mentioned, if you can really see that someone perhaps isn't as fine as they say they are, how do you help sort of get to a point where maybe a deeper conversation can be had?
I think it comes down to, again, each person might have different ways of addressing that or talking or asking questions. And, I often find that the silence allows the other person to initiate conversation or to share a bit more. And just that pausing, where I think the asking, are you okay, and the listening almost comes in hand there. Yeah. Because if you ask the question and you keep talking, then you're missing the listening part a bit there as well.
So true.
So I do really like, and you mentioned it before, your pause and just sitting and waiting for the response is that listening and the asking the question as almost together as that approach. And so very much when you hear someone respond in a way that's, yeah, I'm fine, and just digging a bit deeper, going, and we talk about this, for those who have done some, for example, like a mental health first aid. Yeah. A big focus of that approach is those I statements. I noticed this, or I saw that this had occurred, or I know you're normally like this at work. I noticed that this is how you were today, and really saying that this is me as an individual noticing something about you, therefore sharing that I care about you and I want to support you, and I have noticed something. Yeah.
And I think actually they even they might say, when using that I language, it's I am, and give an example of a feeling that you might be carrying going into that conversation. And then following that on with almost that reflection of, I'm feeling worried because I felt a bit of an energy shift today. I just wanted to check in. How are you? And so it's a little less focus on the person per se and using the you language of, oh, you seem really flat or you don't quite seem yourself, which can be, I'm not saying that's not a helpful way to lean into the conversation, but if you did want to try flipping that to help create that really safe space, I think that works really well too. So sharing how you're feeling, what you've observed, but really trying hard. And I remember when we did the mental health first aid training, they challenged us to share what our emotion and experience was without using the word you. And so, which is really,
tricky,
really tough. And so sometimes that does warrant just a little reflection beforehand to maybe check in with yourself and go, well, actually, am I in the right headspace to navigate this conversation? What do I need? Am I going in with an open mind, ready to listen? And then maybe you might even have a think about, well, what's that first question going to be? How am I going to lean into this conversation? What's my backup if they say, yeah, no, all good.
And on that, what is the approach you take if they aren't all good and they do share a lot of information that is, whether it's concerning or challenging for them and they are looking for support in that moment.
Yeah. And I think a really big part of our conversation today was the listening part can have so much more of an impact than you might even realize. And I think especially as therapists, we go in sometimes to a conversation with goals or expectations about outcomes or wanting to put actions in place, but actually sometimes all you really need to be doing is asking if they're okay and listening to what they have to say, validating how they're feeling and going, man, that must be really hard. And that can honestly be enough sometimes to completely change the course for that person for the day or whatever lies ahead for them. So I think one really big takeaway that I would want people to know is that you do not have to fix all of the problems if you're going to lean into a conversation like this, and actually just knowing that your part to play might just be listening, and that's enough, and that's exactly what that person needs.
Yeah, and a lot of the time I feel when talking about barriers, some people feel that they're not the right person to take on what someone might be sharing, and they are effective listeners, but they question whether they're the right people. And I think if that person has come to you or has shared that, then you're the right person.
Yeah.
You're the most effective person in that moment that person's comfortable sharing with. And obviously in terms of, that next step, encouraging action, which we can talk about in a second, that's where maybe if you feel like you're not the best person to support action being taken or need someone else to come in, then yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so
you
true.
can share that. But in that moment, I think it is very much finding an environment where you can ask that question, listen really thoughtfully, and feel comfortable that the listening is exactly what's needed in that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can just be a matter of, recognizing that something must feel really hard or tricky, or can you tell me more about that? That how's that made you feel? And just asking more questions about their experience, rather than necessarily jumping in with, it's not necessarily a moment to swap stories or try and help them come out of that moment by telling them, oh, don't worry about that. You've got nothing, you don't need to be thinking that way about things. Sometimes it's just, really acknowledging how they're feeling in that moment.
And that's tricky, I think, because for a lot of people, you hear something and your default is probably to jump into solutions focused, which is a reflection of someone's just desire to care and to try and help that person through. And I think for, a lot of in clinic space, we see that a lot where we are wanting, therapists are wanting to find solutions and to try and help this person through. But you're absolutely right. Sometimes the listening component is exactly what is needed in that person to be heard and validated in that moment. One point that I think is a really strong component of the steps here is the listening and the effective listening.
Yeah, definitely. But certainly, the third step as part of this is encouraging action. And so seeing where there is an opportunity, and encourage action, they're not really referring to here being like, why don't you try X, Y, and Z to fix the problem that you're referencing? It's actually more around seeing what their reflection might be for that, to go, I can really hear there's a lot going on. What do you think might be the next step here? Or how can I best support you through this? And seeing what that perspective looks like. And sometimes I actually do find myself asking, when I am involved in these conversations, being like, now before I respond to you, would you like me really just to listen as part of this, or do you want me to help you problem solve it? And I find that can be really powerful as well, because sometimes the encourage action is actually, I'm so glad someone asked. I really would like some help in unpacking this further and things to try. But sometimes, yeah, like we said, it's just about the listening and then maybe thinking about what their next step to accessing support might be.
And I think when you are able to, listen and validate effectively, then the action part is a collaborative thing. I think sometimes, as you said, like if we're going solutions focused with action, then that's you suggesting things or putting your thoughts onto another person. And maybe they're not at that stage yet.
Definitely.
And so if you're able to do it collaboratively and as you said, do you want me to listen now, or do you want to work or problem solve something together, then what you're doing is validating that person's experience in that moment, but also being open to encouraging action and also being able to be a champion for that person to go, I'm here to support that action.
Definitely.
Because I think a lot of times someone is being quite vulnerable and sharing and you're there to listen and you had this conversation, but then the action part can be that accountability, that next step that can be really hard.
Yeah.
And so if you're going, you've got this and I'm here to support you, and if you think you need that, then let's do it together, or
definitely.
whoever else needs to support you in this, then it's giving that person the confidence that they can make a change or take action about something that's going on.
Yeah. And even having in your mind about who the best people to approach the next steps might be, if you're talking to a young person and they're sharing, to then go, hey, I can hear there's a lot happening here. I feel like it'd be really helpful for mum or dad to know about this. Is this a conversation that you'd like to have all together, or would you prefer if I was to reach out to them and share some of the things that we spoke about to help in having that chat from here, Or if it's even with a staff member to go, like, I think it's important that you can share this as you need to, who can I help you have a conversation with? And, we've got access to things here like the employee assistance program. So there's, even if the next step is, have you thought about chatting with someone else? Have you thought about reaching out to your doctor? That feels really heavy and you don't have to carry that alone. And actually, speaking of other resources, there are so many great options available. Are You OK website has got a bit of an index of some places that you can access, but things like Lifeline, Beyond Blue, Kids Helpline, there's some really incredible services available that anyone can access. And I think sometimes just being able to pass on the number so that then next time maybe they are feeling quite deep in their experience, that they have someone they can reach out to.
Yeah. And these services, specialised services to support people, and I guess when we're talking about, encouraging action, if you feel as though you don't have the tools to best support where the conversation is going, then that's where these support services can be really useful as well. And encouraging someone and supporting someone to make that call.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And even I was chatting with a friend the other day and they were just sharing some things that were going on, and I knew that they did have some supports, like formal supports in place. And I asked them, hey, is this anything that you've sort of checked in with your psychologist around? And they had shared that, actually, no, we hadn't quite gotten to that. And I'm like, would you feel comfortable to share that? Because I feel like they could have some really helpful things to share as part of that journey with you. And that actually prompted some really good conversations from there. So I think even knowing sometimes about who you can refer them onto as well, and helping them to feel safe to have those conversations elsewhere.
Yep. So then I guess after these conversations and I guess that encouragement of action, the last thing we try and work towards is a bit of a check-in. And I know that I often find this the hardest part.
Yeah.
I often find it hard to check in because, it's something that is an extra step in that conversation, and it means that you then have to find time to make that check in, whether it's later in the day or even if it's look, we've had a brief chat now, maybe not the right time to continue this conversation. Maybe I can check in later, but it's really important that. This is one of the most important steps. It's really important that you do find that time to check back in.
Yeah.
Because you don't know where that person's at. You kind of want to keep that connection going.
Yeah.
Because a person has, opened up and has shared some information, and I think to check in just reinforces that support is ongoing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it can just be a matter of when you next see them and have that same quiet space. Some of those are things you might have thought about earlier in these steps to go, hey, I just wanted to check back in after our chat the other day. How have you been going? Or even just sending as a little text, little Post-it note on their desk. There's lots of ways that you can check in to let someone know that you're thinking of them and that you're there. And maybe the conversation looks a bit different from that first initial one, but I think exactly like you said, it's just reinforcing that you continue to be there as someone if ever they need to reopen that conversation or chat about anything new.
So we've heard the steps involved in checking in the are you okay, and asking that question, listening, encouraging action. And I think it's always good to provide a bit of an example or to share one of our experiences. And I guess you were talking earlier about one quite profound experience you had around the are you okay? And I guess you didn't go into that conversation thinking that it was going to be a question about are you okay and what might happen from it. But a really good example of how you provided an environment and the question led to some other things.
I was doing a functional capacity assessment actually for a family who was new to the service, and part of that involves a parent consult, and you kind of chat through about how things are looking across that day for that young person, and the things I think obviously has a very strong focus on the things that are tricky. And I think through those conversations, you can really hear about what some families, what some young people are managing and the heaviness that can create sometimes. And this parent was sharing with me and had been for some time about their experience. And I just felt that weight, I suppose, in having that conversation. And I just, towards the end of that, I just sort of paused and said, I know that this conversation and the purpose of this conversation is around your young person, but I actually just want to ask you, like, how are you? Are you okay? And it was, I think, literally that sort of first question, like having the steps here. And then I think perhaps it almost disarmed them a little bit in that moment, and they did share quite freely about how they were feeling and how that was weighing for them. And I just listened. I just held the space and validated, like we said, to go, gosh, I can't even imagine how hard that would be for you. And something I think I often reference is, I know for our beautiful families, we say we can't fill from an empty cup, but so many are trying to do exactly that. So I might also check in to say, what formal supports do you have in place? Do you feel like you've got people to talk to about it whilst you're doing everything that you can to support your beautiful children? And at the end of that conversation, I not only met them that one time, and I just said, I'd really like to offer you a hug. Would you be interested? And they had said, actually, I really would love a hug. And I sometimes do this thing with hugs where if I'm offering that in praise, I'll hold that until I start to get even the tiny cue that someone else is pulling away. And so I went into that with just going, I'll hold on until they let go. And just minutes passed, and then before they broke away from that. And I don't feel like I didn't solve any of their problems. I didn't change anything about their experience, but I think just offering a moment where they could feel seen and heard might just help to then help them keep going within that. And I ended up, the interaction here is quite brief when doing an assessment like this, but I did end up following up with an email just going, hey, you've been on my mind. If ever you want to reach out, my email is open, but here's a couple of resources. If ever you did feel like you wanted someone else to chat to that might be able to share that experience with you and help work through those next steps. That was a brief encounter that I had with that family, but I think that's really stayed with me. And I think when you have the chance to have conversations like this and feel how helpful they can be, I think you just build your confidence over time to not be afraid to lean into those discussions. What's been kind of your experience with that?
Functional capacity assessments generally can bring up a lot of conversations with whether it's with a parent or the individual themselves. Some pretty heavy stuff that people have been managing over a course of a lifetime for a lot of them. And so, yeah, certainly feeling even as a therapist, not fully equipped to manage all those things, but being okay with the fact that the conversation is and listening is really important part of that. But, I think back to, with staff members, I think back to one experience with a staff member who was, just presented a bit differently. And it was like, when it was just asked the question, just, are you okay? It was like, yeah. And just that, yeah. Just the way it was said and, the opportunity presented itself to just go, yeah, like, tell me what's going on. Yeah. And it was just straight into I can hear that, mate. Like that's not, obviously you're not doing okay.
Okay.
And, generally someone who wouldn't share a lot and then was able to share a bit about what's been happening. And it was interesting because in that moment as well, it probably wasn't the right time to have that chat. And I felt uncomfortable doing, but knew it was the right call, was to say, like, that sounds really hard. I want to hear more. I know other people are going to come in to the lunchroom right now.
Yeah.
Are you okay if we check back in later this afternoon?
Yeah.
And we made a time after work to just check in and have a chat. And I think that provided for me, a much safer and more comfortable environment to have that chat. And I know sometimes, the other person is going through their day carrying those thoughts, but at least those conversations happened in a more effective and a safer way.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes, and I guess the point of making this is to say that those conversations can happen and sometimes they can happen very naturally and sometimes you do need to cut them short in that moment. But the check-in is very much I want to check back in with you because you've shared this. Now's not the time to continue this conversation. Like we both know and I don't want to leave you there and not acknowledge it. And so that accountability of checking in to redo the conversation again can be really, really useful. And then a follow-up check-in after that point as well. But yeah, I think back to that experience and it certainly allowed us to be more open together because there's that trust that was certainly built from that conversation to go, one, I felt like I could check in and you felt comfortable enough to share, but also the other person was able to go, okay, you've checked in with me and they've also provided me an opportunity to speak more openly about this in a more suitable time.
Yeah.
And I know that really supported that person who, as I said, is not always someone who would share a lot to feel comfortable sharing more often. And I admit I don't do this enough. There are some really excellent people in the workplace who do this really, really well and something I try and do more of, but something I'm constantly working on, something I'm constantly working on as myself as a person to try and check in with as many people in the right way, asking that question and being okay to either have that conversation there and then or to be able to be accountable in how I check in with that person later.
It's funny to hear you say that actually, because I think from what, I understand of the team that you support, you create those safe spaces all the time and people so often share how comfortable they feel with you and, maybe it's not as formal as asking, are you okay? I think, like you said, we incidentally create those opportunities in ways that feel really authentic to us. So I think you're probably doing this a lot more than you realise, maybe not in the formal way of what the questions are here, but I also think that with the person that you described that interaction with, having those conversations over time, even though they wouldn't necessarily have been someone who typically shared, meant that when they were ready to, you just created that same space that you had previously, but they were able to lean into that in a different way. And I think that's really impactful too. So I guess, with these stories that we've shared, it can come from a single interaction with someone that you might only see for a short period, or it can come with creating those safe spaces over time to then make those conversations feel more comfortable.
Yeah.
So a few things that we've worked through today, but really important conversations. And I hope in hearing, working through the steps, how you might have those conversations and some examples of what it looks like in practice can give others who are listening the confidence to try bringing those conversations into their everyday lives with the humans that they're with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the whole Are You OK campaign, the website has fantastic information and really useful tools and other contacts on there that are resources designed to support people, because what we know is that the mental health system is overburdened, and it's not because of the fact that people don't want to support everybody. It's because lots of people need support and there's just not enough people to provide that support.
Yeah.
And these conversations can be a huge way to informally support as many people in your environment and that you come across each day. And encouragement of action is that formal step, but just the whole point of the Are You OK is to ask that question.
Yeah, definitely.
And so ask that question today and see what you get from another person, and feel okay with being able to listen and be confident that you are the right person to have that conversation.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for all your insights today.
No, thank you for sharing and
having that conversation.
Yes, and I hope everyone is doing okay, and check in with each other, and
look out for each other. Yeah.
And see you next week.
Thanks, everyone.